read a few from Murray Middleman, great name. What can you do locally to get people organized to rebel against the abuse of government repression? Another question, how does anyone make changes without money? Corporations are the ones with money, for example, Monsanto versus small farmers, private manning versus the US government. Can you comment on agitation being the only solution? Someone says, so when is the general strike? And then finally, around the whole theme of rebellion, Mr. Hedges, this philosophy of rebellion seems not only to disregard any hope for victory, but require it. The appeal of your speech tonight is a perfect example of Freud's death wish. It's sexy in the same way. What if by some fluke we win? Jared Paul.
Well, you know, we don't live forever, and injustice is going to outlive us. It's an endless kind of battle. And even if we vanquish one system of injustice, another will rise that we must fight. So, looking at this as a kind of way to live a life, it is inevitable that when we die, there will still be battles to be fought. And I think that when you look at the dissidents under communism, under fascism, under the long, dark night of American slavery, these people understood the power systems that they were fighting against, and they found mechanisms by which they sustained resistance. And when I lay out a bleak scenario, it's because I want us to find those mechanisms. A very good friend of mine, James Cone, who's a great theologian, Union, is publishing a book this fall called The Cross and the Lynching Tree, about the long reign of terror in the South following the Civil War against African Americans. And he said, you know, in many ways people were sustained by music. And I think that, in a way, the question whether we win or not is the wrong question. Because if we get caught up in that, then every setback and every sort of period where it seems that we're alone and we're not succeeding is one that, you know, because we're measuring it against that external reality, it's one that seduces us to give up. And in fact, you know, the bleakness that I put out is, I hope, a mechanism by which we can begin to sustain over the long term forms of resistance, rather than descend into the usual highs, emotional highs and lows that characterize American life. When I had lunch with Berrigan, he said, look, we're called to do the good, or at least the good insofar as we can determine it. And then after that, we have to let it go. It's not our job to worry about where the good goes. Faith is the belief that it goes somewhere. And I think that is, you know, when I was in Washington in December for that protest in front of the White House, we had about 500, it was snowing very heavily in Lafayette Park. And we had mostly veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam, many of whom had been very badly wounded physically and, of course, emotionally. And at that event, right before we walked to the White House to be arrested, this great blues musician, Watermelon Slim, played taps on his harmonica. And then they took a flag that had been on the coffin of a young boy who had just been killed in Afghanistan. His family brought it, and they folded it into the triangle. And then someone beat a drum, and there was a long line in complete silence as everybody marched through the snowfall to go to the fence to be arrested. And I know, I wasn't alone. A lot of us were crying because we know what war is. And when the police came and put the plastic handcuffs on us like this, it turned out that most of the DC police have been in Iraq and Afghanistan. And as they would cuff us and put us in the paddy wagons, they said, keep protesting against this war because it stinks. We can't. Those acts of resistance have to be an end in and of themselves. They have to define the life that is worth living. And if you get caught up in the numbers, I mean, we were back there for the 8th anniversary of the war in Iraq. Again, it was 600 people. I was at Union Square on April 15th to occupy Bank of America. I don't know, we had a few hundred people. You can't let that discourage you. And I know that some of the people who come to these events keep hoping for the thousands, and that, we have to do the good and let it go. And because we're not going to make it otherwise.